So I just made a review on Batman Arkham City recently, and I think it would be the perfect matchup for it to go up against Batman Arkham Asylum in my Which Game Is Better series. If you're unfamiliar with how this series works, what I do is take two games from the same series and compare them in three different categories: story, gameplay, and world. I'll give each game a score out of 10 for each category, and then we'll total the points out of 30 at the end, and whichever game has the highest score is the winner and the better game. Also, please keep in mind these scores will be based on my opinion and experiences with the game, and feel free to leave which game you think is better down in the comments. But without further ado, let's get into the first category.
Opportunities to end this and walk away, but oh no, you had to be the big man.
So starting with the story category, let's start by talking about Asylum. Obviously, Asylum is the first game in the Arkham series, so it was definitely an experiment. However, rather than try and tell the Batman origin story for the gazillionth time, they go for a very unique setting with already established characters and villains, along with an experienced Batman at the helm. Chances are, if you're playing the game, you already know these characters quite well, and you know what Batman is all about. And if not, it's still pretty simple to follow along with. The game takes place completely in the Arkham Asylum, as the Joker breaks free from captivity and has control of the asylum and all its inmates. And Batman is trapped inside, having to fight his way out. Or more like, all these criminals are trapped inside with Batman. I love the concept. The Batman and Joker dynamic is fantastic, of course. I love the use of the villains, and I really enjoy the setting and tone. The story is by no means perfect though. You don't really get much of an arc or understanding of this Arkham version of Batman. They briefly show his parents in the alley, of course, and Bruce as a little kid, but you get very little from Bruce and Batman as characters in this, which isn't a huge deal considering the length of the game and the main focus on you just defeating the villains, but it's not like it's a super deep and emotional Batman story or anything like that. I still really enjoy the story. It's a fun ride, that's for sure, and a good way to start the series so that future games may build on it, but there's nothing overly special about the story in Arkham Asylum. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. As for Batman Arkham City, to use my own words from my review, I believe it's one of the best Batman stories you can experience. Rather than being in a small, claustrophobic asylum, you're trapped in this city full of criminals and supervillains. The game literally opens with Doctor Strange kidnapping Bruce and revealing he knows that he's Batman and that the mysterious Protocol 10 will commence in 8 hours. Arkham City really does feel like a faithful adaptation of the comics. All the characters and villains they were able to stuff into the story without it feeling forced or subtracting from the main two antagonists, Joker and Strange. Joker is even better in Arkham City, as supposedly he's sick and dying from the Titan formula he used in Asylum, and Batman and thousands in Gotham were poisoned by his blood, so Batman has to race to find a cure. However, there's this underlying mystery to the whole thing that I definitely don't want to spoil, but Arkham City's story is quite unpredictable, and there's some really good plot twists. I do feel like Hugo Strange deserved more screen time, but like I said in my review, you constantly feel his presence throughout the game, even though you hardly see him. I really enjoyed how the characters were portrayed, and their dynamics with Batman felt very accurate, like Catwoman, Robin, Mr. Freeze, etc. It's such a great Batman story. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Arkham Asylum did a very good job of laying the groundwork for gameplay in the Batman Arkham series. The free-flowing combat was extremely innovative for the time and was not only used in all the future Batman games, but also many other games like Insomniac's Spider-Man and the Middle-earth series. The combat in Asylum definitely isn't as smooth or refined as the future games in the series, however. You can't double counter, the game will randomly have you punch the air and lose a combo, you can't hit enemies on the ground. Like I said, it did a good job of establishing the groundwork, but it's definitely not perfect. Same situation with stealth. It's very fun, but quite simple and doesn't always work properly. The gadgets are fun to use, but you're quite limited in your selection. The boss fights are pretty good. Some are a little repetitive and a bit annoying, like the Ivy boss fight and the final boss of the game, which is a bit underwhelming. I'm going to give Arkham Asylum an 8 out of 10 for the gameplay. It's still really fun, but it was definitely in need of some refinement, which is where where Arkham City comes in. The combat feels significantly smoother in Arkham City. Of course, you can double counter, you have more range on your attacks, so it's easier to chain and build up combos. There's lots of new gadgets and tools, more enemy variety. The stealth feels more refined, and tools like the smoke pellet definitely help. Arkham City also introduced a pretty expansive skill tree where you could upgrade your armor and unlock a bunch of new moves and skills, like the Bat Swarm, for example. The boss fights in Arkham City are incredible. Many of them are very unique and require multiple different strategies to take an enemy out. The Mr. Freeze one, of course, is one of, if not the best in the whole series. Arkham City did exactly what I feel a sequel should in terms of gameplay, and that's just building upon what everyone really liked about Asylum and its combat, gadgets, and stealth, and just refined and added to it. It's an improvement in pretty much every way, so I'll give Arkham City a 9 out of 10 for gameplay.
Is Poison Ivy really in here?
Obviously, the main difference between these two games is Arkham City is an open world, while Asylum is mostly linear with a few semi-open sections. Arkham City is this isolated portion of Gotham meant to house all the criminals of Gotham, so as one might expect, it's extremely run down and rural. There's criminals and thugs around every corner, and the city is an absolute mess. The perfect playground for Batman to exact his vengeance. I love the design and aesthetic of the world. It's very dark and rural to perfectly fit the theme of Batman and the story. The lighting with the moon shining over the city along with the Gotham skyline in the distance is beautiful. For an open world, it's quite small, but it's very rich and detailed. There's a decent amount of side quests, usually involving a Batman villain, that are really enjoyable, as well as the AR training you can complete for the rewards, and of course tons of those Riddler trophies. I think they made complete use of the small open world they were given, and it's great. New additions like the grapnel boost also made it a lot more fun to traverse as well. I'm going to give Arkham City's world a 9 out of 10 once again. Asylum obviously isn't an open world, but I still really enjoy the setting. Again, the concept of being in this small asylum with all these criminals is really cool. It can often feel very linear and claustrophobic. The asylum is significantly smaller than Arkham City, and with that comes some issues. For one, I feel like Asylum can kind of feel like a maze sometimes, which may be fun for some people, but it's a little frustrating sometimes to find where you're supposed to be going, and the open sections of the game really don't offer much. Definitely not as much to do in the world outside the main story when compared to City, and the free roam once you finish the game is extremely lacking. I'm going to give Asylum's world a 7 out of 10. This leaves us with a final score of Arkham City 27 and Arkham Asylum 22, leaving Batman Arkham City as the winner and the better game in my eyes. Of course, this is just my opinion, but I do strongly believe Arkham City to be a better game than Asylum overall. However, I understand those who prefer Asylum, again, because it's just such a cool concept and premise for a Batman game. But let me know which game you think is better and why in the comments, and if you'd like me to make another one of these videos for the Arkham series, perhaps Origins versus Night next, I don't know, we'll see. But if you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend you check out my individual reviews for Asylum and City. Links will be in the description, and consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you're new. I would really appreciate it. Other than that, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day, everyone.